Danny, you have some wonderful artwork behind you.
Thank you. It's carefully curated.
Okay, I'm watching the waiting room so I can admit people.
Okay.
Hi, Allie.
Hi. Boker
Everybody, just want you to, if I haven't introduced her before, this is Kate Pierce, who helps with a lot of administrative tasks for CBR. So thank you for being here. She's helping take attendance. Hi, Margaret. Let's see. So I didn't think about this. I can't share my screen to show you a midrash and watch the weight room at the same time.
Rainey, do you want to make me co-host and I'll watch the room and you can then do the other?
This is no time to be working on your muscles while watching the weight room there.
Yeah, that's true.
Well played.
There we go.
Okay, I'm a co-host, so I will keep track of the. I will pay attention to the weight room. I will not strain myself though.
That took me a minute, but good one. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, did you want to say anything, Sid?
Oh, well,
hello.
Well, good morning. Welcome, everyone. You know, why don't let's start with the Devar Torah, and then I can introduce our speakers, Laurence Bolotin and Lauren Grossman, and our program right after.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen for a second. Share screen. There we go. Okay, so look at that. Okay, so as we begin the book of Exodus, I wanted to share two midrashim related to why Moshe was chosen. If we think about his background, right? He's raised in the palace. Who knows if he speaks the language of the people? He ends up running away. He's in Midian, seemingly living his life there. We don't know if he would have planned to go back to Egypt. And as we all know, one day he's tending the sheep and he sees the sneh. So this first midrash is responding to that question of why Moshe. So from Shemot Rabbah, Vayomer Moshe Asura na ve'er'eh. And in the Torah, it continues to say ve'er'eh et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh. So in the text it says, I must turn aside, I will turn aside, Asura na ve'er'eh et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh, to look at this marvelous sight. The Midrash plays on this word Asura and says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. I think this got cut off a little bit. Maybe not. Be sar lir'ot. Sar meaning suffering. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sar v'za'ef hu. Ze lir'ot b'tzar'an shel Yisrael b'mitzrayim. Lefikach ra'ui lihiot ro'eh alehem. Miyad vayikra elav Elohim. So the man is downcast, sar, vizaef, and troubled, at lirot bitzaran shel Yisrael, seeing the suffering of Israel in Egypt. And this is the reason, lefikach ra'ui lihiot roeh alechem. This is why he is worthy of being their shepherd, because right after that pasuk it says vayikra Adonai, vayikra elav Elohim. Right after he uses that, then God immediately calls out to him. And it says that it continues in the text, Kisar lirot, vayikra elav Elohim. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It uses sar, and it says, Vayar Adonai Kisar lirot, that he turned to see the bush, and then it says, Vayikra elav Elohim. So it does a play on that sar. Instead of to turn to see the bush, it's he saw the suffering of Israel. So that's one answer of why he is Ra'ui lihiot roeh alehem, because he saw the suffering of the people. This next midrash takes it a little bit further and portrays Moshe with some chutzpah. So later on, Moshe confronts God and says, "V'hitzal lo hitzalta et amecha." You're going to save your people. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, "V'hitzal lo hitzalta vadai." You have not saved your people. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Yodea ani she'ata atid lehatzilam, ele mai echpat lecha be'otam hanitunim tachat habinyan. I know that you're going to, in the future, save them, but what do you care or don't you care about those who are buried, tied up in the buildings, meaning all the buildings that the slaves had to bury? Be'ota sha'a biksha midat hadin lifgoa bo. At that same time, God requested or asked that midat hadin would injure him. How could Moshe have such chutzpah to say, but what about the ones that won't be saved because they've already died making the buildings? Vekevan shera'a hakadosh baruch hu shebishvil Yisrael hu omer lo pagabo midat hadin. Because God saw that it was for the sake of Israel that God spoke that Moshe spoke in this very chutzpahdik way, God did not injure Moshe with midat hadin. So I can stop the share. So that midrash I thought was very powerful in that it recognizes that even in our struggle for liberation and redemption, we have to remember that there are people who were left behind, and it's in their memory that we do the work that we do. And that particularly spoke to me on this morning after watching very late into the night, watching the elections from last night and seeing the results of so much toil and so much labor to bring our country. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rini. What a fitting way for us to turn our eyes towards our people and the struggles that we are encountering in the world today, those that we feel and those that we still might not be fully aware of the extent to which we need to pay attention. And so this morning we have the opportunity to learn about the state of anti-Semitism in America. In October, AJC released its first ever report on the state of anti-Semitism in America. The report compared two parallel surveys, one that surveyed American Jews and another that asked the same questions of the general public on the presence of anti-Semitism. And the results showed some shocking gaps between our views of what anti-Semitism is in our country versus how non-Jews saw the nature and scope of anti-Semitism in our world, and also highlight a lack of consensus on how to define anti-Semitism and what anti-Semitism actually is itself. This morning, we're pleased to welcome Laurence Bolotin, the Executive Director for AJC's Chicago Regional Office, and Lauren Grossman, the Assistant Director of Advancement and Engagement at AJC Global. They will provide an in-depth analysis on the report's findings and offer guidance towards our efforts to combat anti-Semitism, both here in Chicago at home and in our country as a whole. Laurence Bolotin is the Evelyn R. Green Executive Director for the AJC's Chicago Regional Office, as I said. In this role, he's responsible for implementing AJC's international and domestic priorities in the Chicago region. He oversees all aspects of the Chicago operation, including global diplomacy, legislative advocacy, intergroup and interfaith relations, fundraising, and strategic communications. He partners with the local regional board and global AJC staff to build a safer, more secure future for the Jewish people, Israel, and all humanity. Prior to this, he served as Chief Executive Officer for Zeta Beta Tau International Fraternity and other roles in higher education, and he is committed to building a society based on mutual understanding, acceptance, and appreciation for all that makes each of us unique, and lives here in Chicago with his wife and daughter. Lauren Grossman has spent most of her career in the nonprofit world, focusing on fundraising, events, and constituent relations. She joined the AJC team in 2019 and previously held positions at the Boys and Girls Club, the ADL, March of Dimes. She is a graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is currently pursuing a master's in Jewish professional studies at Spertus. She's an active member of JUF's Young Women's City Council and Women in Development Professions, a lifelong performer who grew up in Memphis, who has a beautiful voice. She was part of the Jewish Women's a cappella group and enjoys baking, cooking, cheering for the Cubs, and enjoying the Lakeshore path along the. So thank you both for sharing a little bit about yourselves and your background. It's nice to get to see you as people, and also for honestly the giving up of your time to be able to spend with us rabbis. We feel very appreciative of this gift that you're giving to us and being able for us to learn from you. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to the two of you. And thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having us this morning. It is truly an honor to be here. And I can second the fact, because I've seen it firsthand, that Lauren does have a phenomenal singing voice. I don't think she'll be performing on this call, but maybe a future one at some point down the road. You'll have to ask her, though. I'm not her agent. We have a lot to cover this morning, so we're going to dive right in. And let me see if I'm able to share my screen, or I may need to be made a co-host to do that. Oh, I can't share it, so give me one moment to pull that up. One moment. Okay. Great. So again, welcome and happy and healthy New Year to everyone. We know that at least the first part of 2021 will likely be a lot of being at home. So I hope that everyone has found some type of routine that hopefully won't have to last too much longer as we continue through this most unique time in our lives. Lauren and I are really happy to be here. And the way that we'll be splitting up this presentation is I'm going to take a little bit in the beginning. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, and then she'll turn it back over to me. And then we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. While the screen is shared, I can't see the chat box, but if you have questions throughout, feel free to put them in there and we could definitely get to those toward the end of the conference of the presentation. For those that are just now learning about AJC, a couple of things that you may have heard about AJC during your time. The State Department of the Jewish People, the Dean of American Jewish Organizations, an indispensable actor and interlocutor. AJC takes great pride in the relationships that we build and the presence that we have across the globe. AJC is the leading global Jewish advocacy organization in the world. Our main priorities, as you can see, are combating anti-Semitism at home and abroad, ensuring Israel's security and prosperity, and promoting pluralism and democratic values for all. And the way that we go about our work is through 4 areas. Through our global diplomacy efforts, working specifically in the Chicago region with our robust consuls general corps here, our legislative advocacy, where we work on advocating for pieces of legislation. I should note that AJC is a 501c3, fiercely nonpartisan organization. We build coalitions in the Chicago region. For decades, we have enjoyed wonderful relationships with other communities where we really seek to build an understanding with each other while also looking at opportunities to advocate with each other on matters of mutual concern. And our strategic communications is a way to make sure that our voice is heard in the way in which we hope that it will be. AJC Chicago is one of 24 regional offices in the United States. I also like to ensure people know it's one of the largest regional offices in the United States for AJC. And we certainly take a lot of pride in that. We have 12 overseas posts, and we'll be opening our 13th overseas office this year in the UAE, which we are very excited about. And we enjoy partnerships with almost 40 Jewish communities across the globe. We have a presence on 6 continents, and it's truly a blessing to be able to interact with colleagues and lay leaders in so many countries across the globe that are all committed to ensuring a safe and successful future for the Jewish community. Our relationships, as I mentioned, really matter. And each year we make it a point to maintain those relationships with government officials, senior government officials from so many UN member states, as we continue to push our priorities and our agenda on behalf of the Jewish community. And as you can also see, with 2.6 million followers, AJC has the largest social media following of any Jewish organization in the world. And as I mentioned, one of our key priorities is strategic communications. We have utilized that in a very good way. Certainly, there have been so many challenges during this pandemic, and one of them being is that many of us are stuck at home. Through the launch of our Advocacy Anywhere platform in March, we have put together approximately 160 public programs that have engaged almost 5 million viewers. And we continue to build on that. And you can learn more about the Advocacy Anywhere programs on our website at ajc.org. So let's dive in. In October of 2019, AJC launched a one-of-a-kind report on the state of anti-Semitism in America in 2020. And this report follows the groundbreaking 2019 survey that AJC launched. And for the first time, as you just heard, gauges what the general public thinks about the state of anti-Semitism in America. As we all know, the massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in October 2018 was a real wake-up call for American Jews to the rising levels of anti-Semitism in the United States. Last year, in October of 2019, in an effort to ascertain how American Jews were feeling, we released our first survey on American Jews' attitudes on anti-Semitism. But there were still questions that remained after we launched the results of that survey. We wanted to know, was Pittsburgh truly a wake-up call for all Americans? And what does the general public know and think about anti-Semitism? We weren't sure about the answers to that following the survey that we released last year. So we really wanted to make sure with this survey that we ascertained both how American Jews and the general public were feeling about anti-Semitism in America today. And the result is what we'll share with you today, which is truly a one-of-a-kind report. It is, wrong button. It is important that I touch on a moment on the way that we went about doing the survey. So I want to start with the methodology. It was so important to AJC that we were very confident in the survey findings. So we contracted with the research firm SSRS, which is a reputable public opinion research firm. They have been used by CNN, Pew, ESPN, and several others. SSRS conducted phone interviews with 1,334 Jewish Americans over the age of 18. You can see the dates on the screen, and it has a 4.2 margin of error. This sample size also, you should know, constitutes the largest and most comprehensive Jewish organizational polling of Jewish Americans that's ever been done. Between September 15th and 20th, SSRS also interviewed approximately a little over 1,000 adults from the general public by phone with a 3.7 margin of error. And just to reiterate, everyone that was surveyed was over the age of 18. And the result was 2 parallel surveys that provide us insight and attitudes into how both communities are feeling about anti-Semitism in America today. So we'll dive right in. As you can see, we'll start with some general takeaways of both surveys. The bottom line here is that American Jews are concerned about anti-Semitism. This is probably not a surprise to anyone on this Zoom. 88%, or nearly 9 in 10 American Jews, believe that anti-Semitism is a problem today. And over 1/3 believe that it is a serious problem, while over half say that it is somewhat of a problem. You'll also see that 82% of American Jews believe anti-Semitism has increased over the past 5 years, and almost half, or 43%, say it's increased a lot, while 39% say it's increased somewhat. I should have prefaced, we're going to be throwing a lot of numbers at you, so I apologize in advance. The last 5 years, as we know, included the murders in Pittsburgh, in Poway, in Jersey City, in Muncie, and the continuous attacks of Jews in Brooklyn. We also have FBI data and other sources that demonstrates an increased number of incidents, but the majority of the general public was not aware of this increase, and we'll share a little bit more about that in a moment as well. You'll also see that more than over 1/3 of American Jews, 37%, have been the targets of anti-Semitism, either online or offline, over the last 5 years. And this high number also reveals that, as we probably also know, there's a lot more that needs to be done to combat anti-Semitism in America. Of the American Jews who experienced an anti-Semitic incident, 3 in 4, or 76%, did not report the anti-Semitic incident. One of the reasons why many Jews do not report is because they don't feel like anything is going to change, or this feeling of a resignation in fighting anti-Semitism, or that it's not serious enough, so normalization of anti-Semitism. And we've seen examples of both, and I'm sure we could all agree that both need to change. We want to make sure that law enforcement understands and really takes seriously all forms of anti-Semitism, and that the data is collected and appropriately reported. Oftentimes, Jews feel that anti-Semitism isn't taken seriously, and we saw that through the results of this survey. And they really need to report it when they experience it. We also saw that they're not reporting it nearly as often as they should be. This is why AJC is supporting pieces of legislation like the No Hate Act, which aims to provide resources to adequately track hate crimes in all 50 states. And it's a critical component in being able to improve anti-Semitic hate crime reporting. We've engaged in many conversations here in the state of Illinois with the FBI and others about how we can make sure that individuals here feel more comfortable and safe to report anti-Semitic hate crimes, and also ensuring that law enforcement understands anti-Semitism when they see it. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. American Jews also continue to hide their Jewishness, and this was something that we included in our survey in 2019. We saw that 1 in 4 American Jews have avoided publicly wearing or displaying things that might identify them as a Jew over the past 2 years. We also saw that almost 1 in 3 Jewish Americans have avoided certain places or situations out of their fear or comfort as a Jew. And we've seen this locally as well. I can give you an example of a business owner in the right outside of Chicago that had a swastika spray painted on his window. And this business owner contacted me and said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, you should report this as a hate crime." And this business owner didn't want to do that because the business owner was concerned that if it got out that this was happening, that Jews would not feel comfortable coming to this person's business anymore. And that's a challenge. It's a real challenge that we need to be able to address. One of the significant aspects of this report was our ability to compare American Jewish responses between 2019 and 2020. And of course, several of the numbers were roughly the same or didn't change at all over the course of a year. However, when we asked the question of, do you ever avoid certain places or situations out of your concern for your safety or comfort as a Jew, in 2019, the response was 1 in 4, 25%. And in 2020, the response was 31%, so almost 1 in 3. For a 1 year period of time, that is a significant increase and something that we are concerned about. For the first time, we also asked about social media. We surveyed American Jews about their experiences of anti-Semitism online. And we did this because we really, when we think about the future of anti-Semitism, we know that the digitization of anti-Semitism really is the biggest and farthest reaching battleground when we think about that. The internet is where all sources of anti-Semitism, whether that be the far left, the far right, religious extremists, they all exist simultaneously. So we wanted to obtain more accurate information about how American Jews are experiencing anti-Semitism online and on which platforms. So you can see the percentage breakdown in front of you. A common question I've received is why only 2% on TikTok? And that is largely because everyone that was surveyed was over 18 years old, and primarily the users of TikTok are under 18 years old. I did download TikTok before the New Year's and I made a resolution to actually use it. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try and do that. So this also shows that this is a concern, and this is why we are really advocating and working closely with programs like our Leaders for Tomorrow, which is our high school program, where they are very social media savvy and helping them to understand how to confront anti-Semitism online when they do see it. We also asked American Jews about their views on the sources of anti-Semitism in America today. As you can see, almost 9 in 10 said that the extreme political right was a threat, with 49% saying it was a very serious threat. 85% said extremism in the name of Islam was a threat, while 27% said that it was a very serious threat. And as you can see, 61% said the extreme political left was a threat, with 16% saying that it was a very serious threat. I also want to touch on hate crimes for a moment. American Jews' perceptions align with the data that we've seen. The majority of religiously biased hate crimes are against Jewish targets. And while Jews account for less than 2% of the American population, the newest FBI hate crime statistics found that more than 60% of religious-based hate crimes in 2019 targeted Jews, which was an increase of 14% over 2018. FBI hate crime reporting is almost a year, there's almost a year lag, which is why we're just now getting the 2019 numbers. And I could tell you in the city of Chicago, when we requested a breakdown of hate crime reporting here as well, that number was fairly consistent in terms of the Jewish population clearly taking the lead in not a good way when it comes to being the most religiously, the largest number of hate crimes against the Jewish community of any religion in the Chicago area. The perception of anti-Semitism, the perception that anti-Semitism is increasing, with over 4 in 5 American Jews believe, is supported by the data that we're talking about. According to the FBI's hate crime report, anti-Jewish offenses and incidents and victims of hate crimes all increased from 2018 to 2019. There were over 1,000 Jewish victims of hate crimes in 2019 that were reported, compared to 920 in 2018. Anti-Jewish incidents rose to 953 in 2019, which was a 14% increase from 2018. And anti-Jewish offenses rose to 995, which was up about 100 from 2018. Now, the FBI survey really only shows a partial scope of hate crimes in America, since it depends on voluntary submissions of data from local law enforcement agencies. In this particular new report, 71 cities with a population of 100,000 residents or more reported 0 hate crimes. We know, and while I would love that to be true, we know that that's not accurate. Miami was one of those cities, and as a South Florida native born and raised, I would be shocked if Miami had 0 hate crimes. I would hope it to be the case, but I would be shocked if that was the case. So I also want to talk for a moment about the differences between hate crimes, incidents, and offenses. According to the FBI, for each offense type reported, law enforcement must indicate at least one bias motivation. A single bias incident is defined as an incident in which one or more offense types are motivated by the same bias. A multiple bias incident is defined as an incident in which more than one offense type occurs, and at least 2 offense types are motivated by different biases. So basically what that means is offense is the umbrella category, and incident, whether it's multiple or single, falls within it. It's a lot of information. I'm happy to follow up with those definitions as well following the presentation. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Lauren, to take us through a little bit more about the general public part of the survey.
Thank you, Laurence, and good morning, everyone. One of the significant findings that our survey found is that almost half of US adults, 46%, have either never heard the term anti-Semitism or have heard of it but are uncertain of what it means, which is a pretty extraordinary figure. And what this lack of awareness shows us is that more work needs to be done to educate the general population about what anti-Semitism means, what the contemporary forms look like, and why combating it is so important. Next slide, please. Now we come to the big question, is anti-Semitism a problem in America today? And it was really interesting to be able to compare the responses between American Jews and the general public, and to note the significant difference in the two groups. As we asked them whether anti-Semitism is a problem in America today, it wasn't a total surprise that 88% of American Jews said, yes, it is a problem, where only 63% of the general public agreed, which essentially means, and as we look at the bottom half of this slide, 33%, a third of the general public in the US does not believe that anti-Semitism is a problem today, as compared to just over 10% of American Jews. And then we take a deeper look at the amount of anti-Semitism in America over the past 5 years and whether people think it has increased or decreased. And as Laurence shared in his remarks, it's no surprise that the majority of American Jews, 82%, do feel that anti-Semitism has increased over the last 5 years. But only 43%, nearly half of that amount of the general public, feel that it has increased. And it's really interesting because despite all of the attacks in Pittsburgh and Poway and Muncie and the neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and all of these instances of anti-Semitism, that people still feel that it either has not increased much or it has in fact decreased. And now let's shift a little bit into anti-Semitism as it relates to anti-Zionism. We asked American Jews and the general public to rank whether or not 3 statements related to Israel might be considered anti-Semitic. And the first question was Israel's right to exist. And as we know, that's a key tenet of anti-Zionism. So we said, is this a form of anti-Semitism? It was no surprise that American Jews, 85% in fact, said, yes, this is absolutely an anti-Semitic statement. And we were quite surprised in, I'm not sure if you would say in a good way or in a bad way, but 74% of the general public felt that, yes, this is absolutely an anti-Semitic statement. This was really a big finding for us. And this strengthens the position and the importance of why we understand new forms of anti-Semitism. And one of the big reasons why we at AJC are working so closely with local, state, and federal governments to encourage their adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism, which includes several examples of anti-Israel anti-Semitism. And then we asked, excuse me, about other anti-Semitic tropes, accusations of Jewish money or dual loyalty, and really looking at the percentages of difference between American Jews' responses and the general public. And there, as you can see on the slide, was more of a spread of difference in these two. And what we recognized is that not only is anti-Semitism hatred of Jews and discrimination against them, but it is a certain perception of Jews, connecting them to accusations of power and control and money. And whereas many forms of racism target the victims as inferior, on the flip side, many forms of anti-Semitism target Jews as having too much privilege, too much power, and as a result, attacks Jews for those reasons. And in addition to the working definition of anti-Semitism, AJC has a wonderful resource called Translate Hate, which is a glossary of anti-Semitic terms and tropes. And we are really using that as a wonderful tool to continue to educate everyone about these nuanced versions of what could be considered to be anti-Semitic examples. This last takeaway is really, really interesting and quite concerning. As you'll see, the question was, if a Jewish person or organization considers a statement or idea to be anti-Semitic, would that make you more or less likely to consider it anti-Semitic? 7 out of 10 Americans said that if a Jewish person or an organization considered an idea or statement to be anti-Semitic, it would either not make a difference or they would be less likely to consider it anti-Semitic. It's a really staggering question when you think about it, because we want to ensure that Jews can define the persecution against them, and that the general public trusts that this persecution is in fact legitimate. Just in the way that we listen to the African American community to explain anti-Black racism, and we listen to the Muslim community to define Islamophobia, we want people to listen to and take seriously Jewish perceptions of anti-Semitism. And now we'll shift gears just a bit to key findings on the Holocaust. It's really interesting that almost 1 in 4 Americans, 24%, report knowing little to nothing about the Holocaust. That is a staggering fact, but it is not unique to our survey. In several other Jewish organizational surveys, the data is reflected in similar ways. The interesting piece is that while we would hope that that number would be so much smaller, 68% of the general public say that they know some or a lot about the Holocaust. No surprise, the majority of American Jews, 99%, say that they know some or a lot about the Holocaust. So that really speaks to the importance of Holocaust education. And one of the questions that we were really curious to know about is if the general public feels as strongly as American Jews do about having Holocaust education in the schools. And in fact, they do, which is fantastic. 99% of Jewish Americans and 90% of the general public say it is important to teach about the Holocaust in middle school and high schools. So obviously, that's a really important piece of our findings. And we, of course, recognize the critical nature of teaching the Holocaust in schools today, because we know that anti-Semitism has continued. And by teaching about something that happened so long ago, it reaffirms the importance of continuing to fight it today. And so I will now turn it back over to Laurence to close us out.
Thanks, Lauren. Before we open it up to questions, I want to spend some time talking about where we go from here. Certainly, if we just ended it with the survey numbers, this would be the start of a depressing morning in many ways. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure to reinforce the work that is being done and what needs to be done by AJC and by many other organizations that I'm sure you're familiar with as well. So how does AJC plan on transforming these findings into action? And how does this real impact how does it really impact our current and future advocacy efforts? We believe in data-driven advocacy. And this data that we've been able to pull from this report is going to drive our work in the 4 key ways that you see on the screen in front of you. When it comes to defining anti-Semitism, we knew before, however, we really know now that there is a need for a definition. And Lauren touched on earlier the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism, which we have already been promoting and have been advocating for dozens of countries to adopt this working definition of anti-Semitism and its pertinent examples, which include anti-Israel anti-Semitism. But now, because of this data, we have proof that a definition is needed. And we now know that the majority of Americans, Jews and non-Jews, believe that certain statements like Israel has no right to exist, which is a fundamental position of anti-Zionism, is indeed anti-Semitic. The definition the examples in the definition also covers other anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracies, such as dual loyalty, which you saw as a question on our report. This working definition we've been focused on here in the Chicagoland area as well. In November, we were very pleased to speak to the village boards of both the Village of Forest Park and the Village of Lincolnwood about the importance of adopting the working definition, and both villages unanimously adopted the working definition of anti-Semitism. And we'll be working with civil society leaders in both of those villages to now understand how to utilize it as a resource. We're actually also in conversation with over a dozen other cities and municipalities in the region about about also adopting this working definition of anti-Semitism, including the city of Chicago. When it comes to education, there's a direct correlation between the lack of knowledge of the term anti-Semitism and a lack of knowledge about the Holocaust with levels of education. We need to continue to educate about what all forms of anti-Semitism look like today. And that's why AJC published the resource that Lauren mentioned earlier, Translate Hate, which we're happy to send the link in a follow-up, which is a glossary of contemporary anti-Semitic tropes and terms. We're also ensuring that we're utilizing this survey to educate local, state, and federal government leaders. We have done this presentation with the Jewish caucus and the state legislature, with members of Congress. I'm doing one Thursday with the legislator in Indiana. I've shared this in Iowa as well. So we're working very hard to make sure that this information is presented to as many populations as possible, because it's information that the community really needs to know. But when it comes to building coalitions, we need to continue to work across civil society, across religious and ethnic lines, to build coalitions to combat anti-Semitism. We know, and AJC has a long track record of doing this, that we are stronger in our advocacy and partnership with others. This is also because anti-Semitism is a societal problem. It's not just a Jewish problem. And when we combat it together, we're helping to protect our democracy, our values, and really our liberty as Americans. And number 4, better data collection and reporting. Again, our survey, as you saw, revealed that 3 out of 4 American Jews, or 76%, who have been the target of anti-Semitism in the last 5 years, did not report the incident. And we simply can't let anti-Semitism be normalized. We really have to demand that reports be taken seriously. We also have to demand that more data collecting and reporting is done. And that's, again, while we're encouraging all Americans to urge their senators to support the No Hate Act. It's passed in the House of Representatives. We now need to see it passed within the Senate. Again, this act aims to provide resources to adequately track hate crimes, including anti-Semitic hate crimes in all 50 states. And we've been collaborating with other organizations on this piece of legislation, such as the Urban League here in the Chicago area. So finally, what can you do? You're already doing all of these things. We know our audience here. We know that you're already educating yourself. We also encourage you, if you're not currently doing this, to use and support the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. And Rini, I could send that to you to share with those that are on the call this morning as well. We also hope that you'll use and promote AJC's Translate Hate. It is a valuable resource and glossary of terms for really all ages, because sadly, we're seeing in middle school students that are being subjected to some of these tropes, and we need to be able to help them understand how to address it and combat it. We know you're speaking out, and we know that you're an ally, of course. And we know that many of you are making public statements, and we know that you're participating in coalitions. And we know that you're part of the solution when it comes to restoring civility to public discourse. AJC Chicago is launching our Community of Conscience next month. And Rini, I'll send you this information as well. On February 2nd, will be the first session of our Community of Conscience, where we're going to be exploring different models of civil discourse. And the first model that we're going to be exploring is Donna Hicks' research on dignity. And we're going to be bringing together community leaders across the Chicagoland area in so many communities to really talk about what that looks like and how we engage in positive civil discourse. And we would invite all of you to participate with us as well. Advocate, it's what AJC does. We're an advocacy organization, and really supporting measures that help reporting and prosecution of hate crimes. So if you have the relationships in your area of the FBI, of the police, really helping to make sure they understand the importance of getting these accurately reported. And finally, providing support and resources, supporting funding for community security needs, which we know we've seen in the state and hope to continue to see that as well. Believe it or not, we only touched on some of the results from this survey. We probably would have had you on till noon if we covered all of it. So you can go to our website at ajc.org/2020 report, where you could see the survey of American Jews, the survey of the general public, and you could also see a comparison between both. So that was a whole lot of us talking, but we really wanted to make sure that you saw some of the most significant takeaways of this report. And I see that there are a lot of comments in the chat. So let me start there, if that is okay. Yes, go Badgers for all of those Wisconsin alumni, Rabbi Richard. Can we talk about how we define a lot as an increased a lot? So that is a great question. In this particular survey, and this is feedback we've already been given for our next survey that we'll do, the question was somewhat, a little, or a lot. So a lot was really up to the discretion of the individuals taking the survey. But a lot to me could be very different than a lot to Lauren. So that wasn't something we drilled down further on in the survey. To whom do you report an anti-Semitic act? The police, the AJC, the ADL? Yes, yes, yes. Call the police, start with the police. The ADL also does a great job of tracking these. AJC will connect you with those that need to be alerted of this as well. So I don't think there's one answer. I would say yes to all three that are mentioned there. It's important that people understand what's happening in the community. I think it's also important to alert the mayor's office, depending on the city or village that you're in. If there's a human relations commission or something similar to that, that's also an important entity to make sure that they're aware of what's happening. Has the percentage of Jews avoiding public display of Jewishness increased, or has it always been 1 in 4? So we only have 2 years to compare this to from an AJC survey, and that has remained, that is the one that went from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3. So it did increase in 2020. In 2019, we saw it as 1 in 4, and in 2020, we saw it up to 1 in 4, which was a significant increase. I'm sorry, up to 1 in 3, which was a significant increase over the course of 1 year. Yes, Michael, police absolutely report to the police. Let me see. What about some of the newer platforms like Snapchat and Parler? I will let you know in 2021. Although Snapchat, I believe, was on there.
Yes, Snapchat is 5% of those respondents did indicate experiencing anti-Semitism through Snapchat.
What we have seen also is social media, and you may be aware that Facebook finally decided to ban all Holocaust denial posts on their platform, which took a lot of advocacy effort from a lot of organizations. AJC was very pleased that in their announcement that they specifically cited AJC's advocacy efforts working with them, not against them, working with them to understand the importance of doing this. Margaret asks, I also am wondering about the connection between racism and anti-Semitism. I am as well. Certainly when we look at the FBI hate crime reports, we can see that it's a concern. As we continue to develop our relationship with the Urban League, I could see and I hope that perhaps we look at doing a joint survey down the road with another organization where we could look at anti-Semitism and a form of racism, and whether that be the Urban League or other organizations. Where can we get the connection information for the Community of Conscience sessions? I will email that to Rini, and Rini, if you wouldn't mind being able to forward that out to those that are here and anyone that you think would be interested, that would be great too. What other questions do you have? Just feel free to unmute yourself, because now I could see your faces. Yeah, Sydney, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So if I were to draw a Venn diagram between anti-Semitic acts and anti-Israel critique, I think, one of the questions was, how do Americans perceive anti-Semitism and how do Jews perceive right? I mean, that's the thesis here. I have to think that there would be a significant amount of incidents that would fall into a gray area, into that overlapping Venn diagram of anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and that a large proportion of the difference of opinion between Americans and Jews might fall into that area. Can you provide, I mean, number one, is my supposition if true or not? And two, if it is, how do we address the difference between our community identifying sometimes political speech as anti-Semitic and therefore reducing our credibility when we speak about anti-Semitism broadly, versus the general community downplaying anti-Israel actions that are anti-Semitic?
It's a great question, and it's really one of the reasons why we continue to promote and hope for further adoption of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, because that does provide very specific examples of what anti-Semitism looks like. Of course, it also specifies, depending on the context, when it comes to criticism against Israel, is also important to note, because there could be very valid criticism of Israel that would not be considered anti-Semitic. And the IHRA working definition really works to make sure that it is very clear that not all criticism of Israel should be considered anti-Semitic. So that resource is really helpful in that. Part of the other challenge too is that depending on who you ask, you may get a different definition of what anti-Semitism is and what anti-Israel may be. So for those that were unfamiliar with the term anti-Semitism for the purposes of this report, so that they can continue taking the survey, we defined it as a hostility toward Jews. So we were very simple in the way that we defined it. It was, defined as hostility or hatred of Jews. So when you look at the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism and what we'll send as a follow-up, you could see it's certainly longer than that. But it's also a similar challenge when you ask people what would be considered anti-Israel. I think you would get different answers. So when it comes to what type of anti-Israel comments would be considered anti-Semitic, the IHRA working definition really works to provide some very specific examples of that.
Just a quick follow-up. Is there any work that might need to be done internally within our own community to help us be able to define comments that or critiques that are political in nature and not anti-Semitic? Again, I worry about our own credibility and the crying wolf syndrome, and when and I also look at the other groups. We live in a time where everybody is very quick to cry foul on everything that happens to themselves, and again, much of that is worthy and appropriate, but there are times where you diminish yourself by overreacting to circumstances, and I know it's a fine line, and I'm just trying to see if there's anything internal that we should be thinking about in terms as well, because a lot of it's anti-Semitic. Even when anti-Semitism 10 years ago was not as large an issue, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, as it is today, it was still a major topic of Jewish conversation. It's a driver of communal concern. So it's that balance that I'm asking about.
Yeah, we would encourage the utilization of this IHRA working definition internally within our own community as well, in terms of when it comes to providing a consistent definition that we would like to see all areas within the Jewish community utilize. And when we send it out, and you'll see it, I'm sorry I don't have it on the screen right now, I'm happy to kind of dive a little bit further into it. One of the other things that I oftentimes see within our own community is phrases or hear phrases like, well, it wasn't that anti-Semitic. So again, that normalization of anti-Semitism. Or I don't want to make a big deal out of it. So it's almost surrendering to it. And that's a problem that we need to address within our own community if we want to make sure that hate crime is accurately reported as well. Margaret, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
It seems to me that there's a spectrum of anti-Semitism, like, teaching our kids how to respond to an anti-Semitic joke, which, by the way, 100% of the kids that are in 11 different school systems out here in the Fox River Valley have experienced an anti-Semitic joke. They believe that they have been anti-Semitically bullied. I work hard on distinguishing what bullying is, right? But that's very different than a synagogue spray painted or a business spray painted, right? And so while I hear what you're saying about, and we're currently dealing with, I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, we're currently dealing with one individual that has been identified by the FBI now, who has been stickering places in Elgin with Patriot Front stickers, which is an anti-Semitic organization. And I can't get the African-American community to care about this. And I have deep connections at this point. So I have a meeting at 1 to talk to the police chief. It's interesting that after having done a program on extremism with the ADL, with the Gale Borden Public Library, that the response in town has been, yeah, but that's not that anti-Semitic. So we're living it.
Yeah, and if we could be helpful in those conversations, please let us know. We're happy to do that.
I'm thinking that that's
yeah.
possible. I hadn't really realized the range that AJC is doing. I once had an internship, a paid internship with AJC as a college undergraduate. So I'll have you here.
We're happy to have you back anytime. Just let me know.
Continue
But
the conversation.
seriously, if we could be helpful with that conversation, please do let us know.
Okay, that's great.
And also speaking with the community of Elgin to talk about the working definition and the importance of that, because that could be helpful with this as well.
We can take it all offline. That's fine. Do we have your contact information? And somebody asked if we're getting hard copies of this report, which would be really useful.
Yes, I could send that. I'm
Great.
going to put my contact
Doesn't
information in
need
the
to
chat,
ask
and Lauren can do the
else
same.
in chat. So
We'll
Okay.
send several documents for follow-up, and I'm putting my information, and Lauren can do the same in the chat as well.
okay.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Rabbi Joe. Oh, you're muted. By the end of 2021, all of us will figure out the mute and unmute button. I'm confident.
Absolutely. I'm curious to know if and how far, if so, the survey got into the question of the difference in nuances between anti-Semitism on the right and anti-Semitism on the left. And there are some differences. The best quickie definition I heard was from Yossi Klein Halevi, who's spoken to the Board of Rabbis, but I heard this from at one of the shuls that I go to, where he suggested that anti-Semitism on the right tends to delegitimize Jews as individuals, but has less of an issue with the Jewish people, which leads to the anomaly that they're anti-Semitic in their anti-Semitic actions, but they like Israel. And on the left, it's the opposite, where they are all for Jews as individuals, but they have trouble with Jewish people, which leads to the anomaly that they can take a stand against anti-Semitism and yet support BDS. So I don't know how far your survey got with this, but you may have some commentary on that.
It does do a little bit of a deeper dive, and I don't have that up in front of me. You'll see that when we send you the full report. I don't know that it goes probably as deep as we would all like it to, partially just because of how long we are able to keep people on the phone and all the things that we want to cover. But that is a good point. So I'd be curious to hear your feedback after you see how we did drill down a little bit more. And I welcome feedback after all of you take a look at the whole report on ways that we might be able to improve it or adjust it moving forward as well.
Thank you.
Of course. And Lauren, I saw you nodding. Was there anything you wanted to add on that?
No.
Okay.
That's it. No, we're as Lauren said, we're really curious to know your feedback. And one of the things that we've been doing is presenting the report to various synagogue communities. So if you are a congregational rabbi and this might be of interest to you, please do let us know.
I know that we're running close to the hour, so if there's any other questions, we're happy to take them. Otherwise, Rini, I could turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us today, and I will certainly send out everything that you send me. Just some quick announcements. We usually have our programs on the third Wednesday of each month. We did it today because Inauguration Day is on the 20th. So look for an email about a program on February 17th with a woman named Nina Caven, who is an activist around racial justice in Evanston. She's done amazing work in Evanston, and she's coming to talk to us about her learning about racial justice and becoming involved. And let me know if you want to give a Devar Torah or do a short text study before one of our programs. Would love for other people to do that. And last announcement, and I'm going to send information about this out. There is a day, they're calling it a learn-in around racial justice on Sunday, February 7th, organized by a group of Jewish professionals, mostly in the city. They invited me to be on the planning committee because they were hoping that I could encourage congregations to participate. So we're planning programs for Sunday schools, which I'll talk to educators about. There in the afternoon, there are going to be opportunities for families who are racially diverse, especially families with kids who are racially diverse, to meet each other and talk. And then there's programs throughout the day for teens, college students, and adults. So that's February 7th. I will be sending information about that. Anybody else have announcements, or Sid, any announcements?
No, I think you covered it. Really appreciate, thanks again for being with us, and wishing everybody a happy new year, safe, and stay well, and looking forward to seeing you guys for our next program.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Lead Route. Hi, Sid.
Hi, Rainey. Anything we need to chat about?
No, honestly, I can't think of anything.
Okay. Actually,